Giving some brief instructions. We're recording this in case you didn't hear that. So welcome, everyone. I am Jan Fisher, the Executive Director of Nonprofit Westchester, and we're really happy to be able to bring this important webinar to all of you. Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia Impact, Available Resources, and Legal Planning. We're really happy to have people with us who can offer critical information that you need. And I thank all of you for preparing for this and tailoring it to this audience and to this subject matter. We have Rachele Nicoletti with the Alzheimer's Association, David Zucker also with the Alzheimer's Association. We have Deborah Farber-Kaiser from Cuddy Feder, and Shervaun Clark also from Cuddy Feder. And a big thank you to all of you for taking the time to plan this for this particular audience. We are nonprofit Westchester, and our sole mission is to strengthen the nonprofit sector in Westchester. And we're really proud of this mission and proud of the organizations that fortify our membership and provide such critical services to our community. If you're not a member, we hope you will learn more. I want to thank today's sponsors. We can't bring you these resources and the events that we do without the generosity of our community. Westchester County and the Westchester County Board of Legislators is such a strong partner with us. The nonprofit sector delivers government mandated and other critical services, and we here in Westchester have a really good partnership in ensuring that the people that need services and information most get it. We are really fortunate to have a business sector and remarkable business partners that understand and believe in the work of the sector and choose to invest in it. Cuddy Feder is a newer partner to the table, but already we've worked so closely with them, and the culture of that law firm and their willingness to give so much to us and work with us has been so impressive, and we're so grateful to all of you. So thank you to them, and really for being, a beacon of what a good nonprofit business partnership looks like. And we also benefit from the investment of numerous businesses that do invest in our work and understand the importance of it. So thank you to all of you. And now it is my pleasure to get going with this. We are recording it. We will take questions and answers at the end of the presentations, and I will help to moderate that. But if you have a question, please put it in the chat. If it's something burning and urgent that you need answered right away, we'll try to get to it, but we are going to hold the questions off until the end. So thank you. Stop sharing, and I welcome Nicoletti to begin the presentations from the Alzheimer's Association. And really thank you. I'm sorry, Rachele, I really thank you so much. You are a volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association and can do anything you want on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon and choose to do this. So thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be with you this afternoon. As Jan mentioned, I am a volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I come to be here before you today. And then we'll spend about 40 minutes going through this good information about Alzheimer's and dementia. And hopefully there'll be pieces of this that you can take with you and use, if not today, tomorrow. So my career as a volunteer started when I was 15 years old. It's been a long time. My parents were immigrants from Italy, And when they came to the United States, they didn't have very much. And without the help of people around them, people who were volunteering community organizations, they wouldn't have been able to fulfill the American dream. And they lived wonderful lives. They raised 3 beautiful daughters, a lawyer, a teacher, and me, the banker. So after a very long career in the financial services industry, I retired, and throughout I've been volunteering. And in 2017, my mom was diagnosed with dementia. At first, I didn't know where to turn. I became the key care partner for her. My dad had macular degeneration, but his brain was so sharp, and he was lost without his best friend, who he had been married to for 75 years. And so it was a big adjustment trying to figure out what to do. And at first, I didn't know that there was a difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. My uncle had had Alzheimer's, and what he went through was very different from what my mom was going through. So for a few years, we struggled with getting resources and figuring out what to do. In the meantime, I continued my volunteer work, and I'm a volunteer for Volunteer New York. With them, I'm a placement specialist, and I put people together with volunteer opportunities in Westchester and Rockland counties. And so I saw this opportunity with the Alzheimer's Association to become a community educator. And I said, you know what? That sounds like something I really would enjoy doing. Let me find out what more about this. And so I contacted the group and became a community educator. I can't tell you how wonderful it was to make this connection. The Alzheimer's Association offers so many resources. I was immediately able to take advantage of getting a care coordination, a Zoom call with my dad, my 95-year-old dad and I on the phone together on a Zoom call, talking about my mom's condition and what was going on. And we got such really practical advice. And I finally was able to make the connection. Alzheimer's is a part of dementia. I never knew that. And so I became determined to spread the word and let everyone know about this organization and help others when the situation arises and when they need help the most. So let's get started. Understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. Our learning objectives today are to be able to compare Alzheimer's and dementia, recognize how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain, list the risk factors of Alzheimer's disease, identify the different stages of the disease. And it takes about maybe 4 to 7 years to go through all the stages. Some people live longer, but it could be a very lengthy process. Describe how scientists are working to advance research, and then name the resources that are available through the Alzheimer's Association. So hopefully you'll be able to absorb some of this as we go along. And as Jan said, if you come up with questions as we go through, please put them in the chat. So let's look at the impact of Alzheimer's and what the facts are. So first of all, over 6 million Americans have Alzheimer's or other dementias. Really, it's closer to 7 million at this point, and there are 55 million people that have Alzheimer's currently living with dementia, I should say, around the world. In addition to that, there are more than 11 million people who are providing unpaid care for these loved ones. And typically, these are family members and friends who are taking care of people that they love, people that they know, people that need help. And they're not getting paid to do this. This number is projected to reach nearly 13 million by 2050. 80% of the care provided at home is delivered by these family members. And over half of these people that are doing this caregiving work have reported the impact to their own lives, going into work late, sometimes losing their jobs, needing to take time off, all of this as caregiver demands escalate. So it's an important part of the population that is often overlooked, in addition to the people that have the dementia, the people that are taking care of them, care partners, as we call them. 1 in 3 seniors die with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's kills more people than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. The nation's cost in 2023 was over $345 billion. By 2050, that may be more than $1 trillion. The lifetime risk of Alzheimer's at age 45 is 1 in 5 for women and 1 in 10 for men. You'll hear a little bit further in the presentation that yes, women are more affected than men are. 2/3 of the people with dementia and Alzheimer's are women. Interesting, only 4 in 10 people will talk to their doctor about cognitive concerns, but 7 in 10 want to know about cognitive issues if it could allow for early treatment. And this is one of the things that I try to stress as I'm doing these community education programs in the community. This isn't something to be afraid of. This is something to get information about as you start to see changes in yourself or in others that you love. Getting information to get to know what your doctor thinks about your situation, identifying what exactly is it that's going on. It could be any number of things. It doesn't necessarily have to be dementia, but early diagnosis is the key right now. And David will talk to you further on about the kinds of treatments that are available. So let's look at the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia. Let's test your knowledge. True or false? Do you think Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process? Now, when I ask this question, people always say, well, no, I don't think so. Well, do you think that as we get older, we're going to lose our memory and have issues with remembering things? And then most people will say, no, I don't think so. That's false. Alzheimer's is a brain disease that causes problems with memory, thinking, and it's not a normal part of aging. You've even heard of superagers there's very few of them, but whose memories increase as they get older. So it's not a normal part of aging. The second question, true or false? People younger than age 65 can get Alzheimer's. And I think most of you know now that the answer to that is true. Although it's much less common, people younger than 65 can also develop Alzheimer's, even as young as in their 40s. So we're going to hear from the expert. We've got some videos throughout this presentation. There'll be experts. There'll be people that are afflicted with Alzheimer's and dementia that will share their thoughts and feelings with you. And there are also some care partners. So the expert here is Dr. Heather Snyder.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual. But there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
So as Dr. Snyder said, the umbrella term dementia covers all of these things. Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. You might have heard of some famous people with some of these other dementias. Bruce Willis, for example, comes to mind for frontotemporal. Wendy Williams, also frontotemporal. Robin Williams, Ted Turner, Dick Clark were all afflicted with Lewy body. So that's one thing about dementia and Alzheimer's. Anyone that has a brain can possibly get the disease. Why is an accurate diagnosis important? Why do we need to know what type of dementia a person may be suffering from?
Certainly having the diagnosis of Lewy body was helpful in our planning because we began to understand where this was coming from in the brain, where otherwise we would not have known. Like we knew something was happening, but what was it? To give it a label actually helped, although it was a big umbrella. It explains some of the characteristics and symptoms that we were experiencing and seeing.
So let's take a look now at the summary of what we've already talked about. Dementia is a general term for a collection of symptoms that are severe enough to interfere with daily life. So that's a general description of what dementia is. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. It is a progressive brain disease. So the brain is our most complex organ. It's also our most powerful, despite only weighing 3 pounds. Alzheimer's afflicts the brain. We're going to hear from another expert now.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
So Alzheimer's in the brain, the recap is more than 100 years ago, Dr. Alois Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, this formation of what's known as plaques and tangles. And it's important to understand that these plaques and tangles are things that can be seen. They can be seen on a PET scan. It's said that 20 years before there's any sign of dementia, these things may begin to be forming in the brain. So when we talk about early detention, this is so important to realize that even the slightest little thing that might not seem right, it's important to figure out what might be going on. Alzheimer's causes nerve cells to die, which leads to shrinkage in the brain. But the brain is always generating new cells every day up until our 90s. So there is a lot of hope for people, for all of us actually, to continue to do things differently that might help us help our brains. The brain changes result in changes in memory, thinking, and behavior. So everyone with a brain is at risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. But let's talk about what the risk factors are. Clearly those, let's test your knowledge. Let me catch up to the slides. Okay, here we go. What is the greatest risk factor for Alzheimer's? What do you think? Genetics, family history, age? Well, genetics, certainly there's nothing that we could do about genetics. They are what they are. But for any of us, there are tests that are available that we can check to find out if we have the gene that is more likely to give us Alzheimer's as we age. Family history is certainly a risk factor for Alzheimer's. For someone like me, with my mom and my uncle and my grandmother before that, I do have a higher risk factor, but there's not very much I could do about that. And then age is the last risk factor here, and we do know that age is a risk factor. But which of these do you think is the highest risk factor? Although Alzheimer's is not part of normal aging, age is the greatest risk factor for the disease. After age 65, the risk of Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. 34% of people 85 and older have Alzheimer's. So if you reach age 85, you have a 1 in 3 chance of getting Alzheimer's. And that, I think, helps put things in perspective as we look at parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and friends and neighbors to help us understand what might be going on in people's lives. We have another expert that we're going to hear from now, Dr.
Alzheimer's
Schneider.
disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are two categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
And as Dr. Snyder said, there are tests that are available that can help us determine if we fall into those categories, the risk genes and the deterministic genes. There are populations that are at higher risk. Black Americans are about, let's see if I can move this here. Oop. Let me move this here. That might be better. Black Americans are about twice as likely as white Americans to have Alzheimer's or another dementia, twice as likely. Hispanic Americans are 1.5 times as likely to have the disease as white Americans. And as I said earlier, about 2/3 of Americans living with Alzheimer's are women. Now, we don't know why these numbers are what they are. We do think that it has something to do with other diseases and other problems that are associated with Black Americans and Hispanic Americans and women. But this is the information that we have to share with you. These populations are at higher risk, so something to be considered. So the risk factors recap. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. An individual's risk for developing the disease increases at age 65. You get Medicare and you get higher risk of Alzheimer's. Family history is also a known risk factor. Having a parent or sibling with the disease increases an individual's risk. Risk genes and deterministic genes are the two types of genes associated with Alzheimer's. Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, and women are at an increased risk for Alzheimer's. Let's move on now and talk about the stages of Alzheimer's disease. And as I mentioned earlier, there are an estimated 4 to 7 years on average for the stages, but people can live as long as 20 years, or they can die sooner than that, depending on the situation and how soon they've been diagnosed. These are people that are actually living with dementia, sharing their stories with us. Let's hear first from Teresa.
I'm like an overachiever. And when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and you just changed it last week and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
So in the very early stages of the diagnosis, sometimes people know what's going on. They know something's wrong. My mom knew something was wrong, but she didn't know what it was. And she would say to me, "What's happening to me?" And it was so hard for her to understand what was going on as she started to lose pieces of her memory. Let's listen to Phil, who was a reporter before his diagnosis.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. You know, I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, you know, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
It's so hard to listen to him speak and look for the words that he wants to use. But that is very, very common for this disease, losing the words. And finally, let's listen to
I
Tom.
think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive, and I'm finding that I'm forgetting more. And they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor, and so that becomes a little disconcerting at times, to see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
And that to me is so uplifting, because in spite of everything that's going on in his life, the living for today, as we all need to be more cognizant of, is so important. We can't know what the future is going to bring for any of us. And so keeping that hope going, I think, is so admirable. And I love that he says that in this video. So the disease, as I said, is a continuum. As early as 20 years before anything could even be visible to anyone, that would be asymptomatic. There are no cognitive symptoms, but possibly a biological change in the brain is beginning to happen. The next stage is MCI, mild cognitive impact due to Alzheimer's disease. So we'll start to see early stage of cognitive ability loss, problems coming up with the right word, trouble remembering names when introduced to new people, challenges performing familiar tasks, forgetting materials that was just read, getting lost in familiar places, increased trouble with planning or organizing. We do a program called the 10 Warning Signs of Dementia, where we talk about the difference between what's kind of normal part of aging and, losing things here and there, forgetting your keys, and what's something that would be more of a concern. So these kinds of things alone might not be so important, but when you start to put them together, you start to realize that there is something that may be happening. And then dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. What I just mentioned to you were the early stage of Alzheimer's typically involves symptoms that interfere with some daily activities. The middle stage is more pronounced. So those are symptoms that interfere with many daily activities. So forgetfulness about events or one's own personal history, feeling frustrated, angry, or withdrawn, especially in socially or mentally challenging situations. So the person might feel perfectly comfortable being at home. You don't really notice a lot that's different, but when you go out into the supermarket, they may feel lost, or you go to an event and their behavior changes and they're not recognizing where they're at. A lot of confusion about where they are, what day is it? Their clothing habits seem to maybe change. Trouble controlling bladder, changes in sleep pattern. Everybody's different, so everyone will experience different things along this continuum, but those are some examples of the middle stage. And then during the severe stage, as Dr. Carrillo mentioned, movement becomes an issue, swallowing becomes an issue. There's a loss of awareness. Definitely at this stage, a caregiver needs to be an active part of the person's life. They may become bedridden. So the recap, the three broad phases of the disease are asymptomatic, mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's disease, and dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. The dementia phase is further broken down into 3 stages: mild, moderate, and severe. No two individuals experience the symptoms and progression of Alzheimer's disease in the same way. While symptoms worsen over time, people progress through stages at different rates as their abilities change. We're going to talk now about FDA-approved treatments, and I'm going to turn it over to David.
Thank you, Rachel. So I like to say this is my favorite section of this presentation because for close to 100 years it wouldn't be necessary. Here we see Dr. Alzheimer's in 1906, where he first describes what would become known as Alzheimer's disease. And believe it or not, it wasn't until 1996 that we had a class of drugs called acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. Big name for a class of drugs that basically just increased a neurotransmitter in the brain called acetylcholine that becomes diminished when people have dementia. And so this is what we had. These class of drugs here did not address the underlying biology of the disease. It just addressed symptoms. You probably have heard of these drugs, Aricept, Exelon, Ranzidine, Namenda, Nemzeric. They've been around for a while. They work to varying degrees. It really depends upon the person. A lot of neurologists suggest trying them. If they help, great. If they don't, you go off them. The side effects are not that significant. But then in 2021, we had a breakthrough, a bit of a controversial breakthrough, but a breakthrough nonetheless. On June 7th, 2021, the FDA approved a drug called Aduhelm, or aducanumab. And this was the first drug in a class of drugs that actually attacks the underlying pathology. It actually goes after the hallmark of Alzheimer's, which is the beta amyloid plaques. So this drug was controversial from the beginning. Some people doubted its efficacy, and I'm happy to say that it's been replaced by 2 new drugs. It's actually been discontinued, and the Biogen, the maker, said it was discontinued not because of efficacy or safety, but because they want to turn their resources to other areas. They're partners with another company, and they have a drug called Leqembi, which is not as controversial and actually can decrease progression over 18 months by 27%. So it's not a cure. I want to be very clear. This class of drugs that dissolves the amyloid, these are not cures. These are just therapies that buy people more time. So I like to say, if you're driving down the highway with Alzheimer's and you're going 70 miles an hour, if you take a drug such as Leqembi, it takes you down to maybe 50 miles an hour. So you're still going pretty fast, but it buys you and your family more time, more quality of life. So Leqembi has traditional approval, and it's actually covered by Medicare and Medicaid, which was a big issue because CMS originally did not cover not just aducanumab, they didn't cover this entire class of drugs. The Alzheimer's Association fought very strongly to have CMS change that position. We held protests and demonstrations in front of their offices in Washington and New York City. And thankfully, they did, in fact, change their position. And now they do cover, under a registry system, Leqembi. And even better news, Leqembi now has, a lot of people are still on Leqembi, but there's a drug called donanemab, or Kisunla, which received traditional FDA approval July 2nd, 2024. And the top line data is even better for that. 35% slower decline in memory, thinking, and ability to perform daily activities as compared to those who took the placebo. Slows progression 4.5 to 7.5 months. So that's great news. 39% lower risk of projection over 18 months. So we really are at an inflection point here. These are not cures, but they buy people more time, and the Alzheimer's Association is spending a lot of resources and a lot of money, over $430 million, over 1,100 ongoing research projects in 56 countries on 6 continents. We are doing everything possible to come up with, if not a cure, therapies that will hopefully slow it down and really help families who are struggling with these issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Rachel, and I'm happy to answer questions about these drugs after.
Thank you, David. There's a lot of reason for hope, and advancing Alzheimer's research. I want to share with you, again, from the experts, what's happening.
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease as a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
And exploring lifestyle factors.
Growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive decline by adopting key lifestyle habits. More and more research shows that factors like exercise, nutrition, and aggressive management of cardiovascular risk factors may impact our ability to slow cognitive decline as we age. And through current studies, we're exploring how certain lifestyle factors may even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
And as Dr. Carrillo mentioned, lifestyle factors can make a difference. We offer a community program called Healthy Living for the Brain and Body. It's one of my most favorite programs because it does talk about the things that we can do now, today, to help our brains be healthier. And then let's hear from a care partner.
A lot of hope from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day. And I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
And let's
It's
move
nice to
on.
see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
So there's a lot of reason for hope for the future. We're going to skip this. Let me go. Clinical trials. Let me go here. No.
Participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
You might hear the phrase negative trial, which means it didn't hit the endpoint. It didn't result in an FDA-approved treatment for the disease. But I think the only negative trial is one that doesn't provide us with valuable information. If the trial is well-designed and is a good scientific experiment, we can get extremely valuable data that can help plan the next trial and make it even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even prevention.
And so these clinical trials are available to people that have Alzheimer's and also to people that do not have Alzheimer's. So there's a thing called Trial Match. Let me just go here and give you this summary. Scientists have increased their understanding of Alzheimer's significantly over the past decade. People living with dementia, caregivers, and healthy volunteers without dementia are needed for clinical studies in order to find methods of prevention, treatment, and ultimately a cure. Both drug and non-drug studies are taking place across the country and online. Trial Match, which can be found at alz.org. Trial Match is a free clinical studies matching program. I want to give some time here, so let me move to our last slide, which is how you can get involved with the organization. There's volunteering, as I'm doing. There are advocacy programs. There's Trial Match. There's the Walk to End Alzheimer's, which I'm sure you've heard about. That's once a year. And then the longest day, which is on the summer solstice, which is a day for fundraising for the organization. Alzheimer's organization is the largest contributor to research, and we count on donations to make that happen. So let's go here to the final slide. There is a 24-hour hotline, 800-272-3900. There's a person that can answer any question in the middle of the morning. If someone needs help, they are very experienced and can direct you to the kind of resources that you need. Please mention that you're from the Hudson Valley area, and they'll be sure to get the resources that are closest to you. ALZ.org is a fabulous website. Everything we've talked about today is there. There's tons of information for people that are just being diagnosed, for caregivers, all different kinds of programs. We offer support groups. The schedule of classes is available, and how to get a care consultation is also available. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shervaun and Deborah.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Really appreciate it, and David as well. And please put your questions in the chat if you have any, and we'll make sure to get them answered. Okay, it's all yours.
Great. Thank you. So first, I'd like to invite you to take a deep breath, and I recognize maybe stretch. And if you have any questions that came up, please jot them down and put them in the chat. We recognize that you're likely here because you or someone you love has been diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, and you have a lot of stress and fear and questions about the road ahead. A person with dementia or Alzheimer's often, as the disease progresses, is unable to take care of their daily needs and make healthcare decisions or financial decisions for themselves. So I want you to take a moment and think about, who do you want to have the authority to make healthcare decisions for you in the event that you couldn't? And now this might be the same person, it might be someone else, but who would you want to have the authority to make financial decisions on your behalf? My name is Deborah Farber-Kaiser, and my colleague Shervaun Clark and I are New York's trust and estates attorneys and elder care attorneys at the law firm of Cuddy Feder. We are going to talk to you about documents that you can put into place for healthcare planning to give someone the authority to make healthcare or financial decisions for you. We'll also cover what you can do to help care for someone if you don't have those documents in place, and talk about paying for the care for someone who has Alzheimer's or dementia. Now, we have limited time, so we're going to do a brief overview of these topics. The first thing we want you to take away from this, if you get nothing else, is that there are steps you can take. It is important to plan early. And if you don't plan early, there are strategies you can take. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to talk about documents. These are, the category of documents are called advanced directives. These are formal written documents. Some of them have language that you have to include in them, where you name a person to make healthcare decisions for you if you're not able to make them for yourself. You express what your healthcare decisions would be. This is particularly important for end-of-life care. And maybe you name the person who can make financial decisions for you. The specific documents we're going to talk about are the healthcare proxy, the living will, and the durable power of attorney. And Shervaun will start by talking about the healthcare proxy and the living will.
Thank you, Deborah, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So before I tell you about what the healthcare proxy is, let me first tell you what happens when someone, say with advanced dementia or someone in a coma who needs to make medical or healthcare decisions, can't make them because they're unable to make them on their own. and they haven't designated someone. Who makes the healthcare decisions in those instances? And the answer is that the law will decide for you. Under New York state law, a close family member or even a friend can make these decisions, but it goes by proximity of relation. So when it comes to family members, it starts from the spouse, and then it goes to adult children, to a parent, down the line in that order. But what happens if the person who is at the top of that priority list isn't the best person for the job? Or if the people at the top of the priority list are your adult children who can't agree on what's in your best interest? So this is where the healthcare proxy comes into play. The healthcare proxy is a document that you can sign to appoint a healthcare agent to make your healthcare decisions for you when you're unable to do that. So when you sign a healthcare proxy, you are in control. You get to choose who you want to be your agent. Signing requirements. So the document must be in writing. You must sign and date it in front of 2 witnesses who also must sign and date the healthcare proxy. Huge question here, who can sign? Well, a competent adult with capacity to understand, number 1, who they are appointing as their healthcare agent, and number 2, the authority they are giving to their healthcare agent to make healthcare decisions for them, can sign. So in the context of our program here, the first question you may be asking is, well, can someone with dementia sign a healthcare proxy? And the answer is, as long as they understand the nature and the consequences of the healthcare decisions with their risks and benefits, they can still sign. So even with someone who may be starting to have symptoms of dementia, or even have an early to mid stage diagnosis of dementia, can still sign these documents. The healthcare proxy is only effective when you cannot make your healthcare decisions for yourself. So when you sign the document, you can still make all of these decisions on your own. It's only when you lack the capacity to make the decisions that your healthcare agent will step in. You can appoint virtually anyone to be your healthcare agent as long as they are a competent adult. This can be a family member or even a friend. You can only appoint one healthcare agent at a time, but the form does allow you to name successor agents in case your primary agent is unable to act for any reason. That's so that there's only one mouthpiece, basically, when a medical professional needs an answer as to what procedures can and cannot be done. So the healthcare proxy gives your agent authority to make any decisions, basically, that you would make for your own healthcare. So any decision that requires informed consent that someone with advanced dementia or someone who's in a coma cannot make, their healthcare agent can step in and make the decision for them. So your healthcare agent can refuse or allow types of treatment, but they're really supposed to make these decisions based on what your wishes are. They need to comply with your wishes. And they basically need to make decisions in alignment with what you would do yourself. So in an ideal world, we would tell you the best thing to do is to sit down your healthcare agent and your successor agents and speak to them about what procedures you definitely know you don't want, or what procedures you would want. But this is not an ideal world. And we understand that having these conversations is not something that most people want to do. Most people have a hard time even sitting down to think about what their wishes are. So we completely understand if this conversation never happens with your loved ones and your agent. So we recommend that you choose someone as your healthcare agent who knows you, someone who truly knows you. They understand and know your religious beliefs, your morals, your values, so that they have a better idea than most other people of what decisions you would make in these healthcare crises. Another way to make your wishes known is to put them in writing. So the healthcare proxy does leave space for you to put your wishes when it comes to various procedures, but there's no need and no way for you to anticipate what procedures might be needed in certain circumstances. So just general language in the healthcare proxy suffices. But there is also a second document that we can use to express your wishes, and that is the living will. So most people are more familiar with a last will and testament. This is a very different document. The living will is a written expression of your wishes when it comes to life-sustaining measures or end-of-life decisions. So you can include anything on this form, which is tailor-made to your wishes. You can include anything from whether or not you want palliative care, or whether you want artificial nutrition and hydration, which is also called tube feeding, or whether you want to be an organ or tissue donor or not. These are all decisions that you make, and you tailor-make this living will to include whatever your specific wishes are. Like the healthcare proxy, the living will must be in writing, and you sign it and date it in front of two witnesses who also sign the document. And just like the healthcare proxy, as long as you understand the gravity of the authority that you are giving, basically listing out your wishes as a directive, you can sign the living will. And the living will is also effective only when you are not able to communicate and make your healthcare decisions on your own and express your wishes. So we talked about how difficult it is to sit your loved ones down and talk about these very heavy topics of what procedures you would like and what your wishes are. And it's even difficult to sit down and think of what you would want. But imagine how difficult it would be for your healthcare agent to have to make these end-of-life decisions and relay them to a medical professional. The living will, one of the main benefits of the living will is that it puts your wishes in writing. Another benefit is that when your agent has to make these very heavy decisions, it removes the guilt from them of having to decide what to do because you've told them. It also helps to alleviate conflict among other loved ones, because you can easily imagine a situation where someone says, well, why would you leave our loved one on a respirator and let them languish? Or on the flip side, it could be, why would you not put our loved one on a respirator and let them pass away? Having a living will that clearly expresses your wishes allows your agent to go to the loved ones who are, your loved ones with the conflict and say, I made these decisions in accordance with what our loved one wanted, and is right here in black and white in the living will. So together, the healthcare proxy and the living will address the healthcare decisions. Deborah will now discuss the power of attorney.
So there's a common scenario where adult children are helping their aging or ailing parents take care of their household, whether make medical decisions and get to appointments, or take care of bills and sign checks. And that's often done in an unofficial capacity. At some point, a bank or financial institution may stop to honor what the adult children say because the children, they don't have the authority to act for their parent. In the event that someone has Alzheimer's or dementia, it's important that somebody else has the authority to make financial decisions. So the power of attorney is the document that gives that authority. So what it is you give the authority to someone to make financial decisions on your behalf. Now, what Shervaun just pointed out about a healthcare proxy is that that is only active when the person is unable to make healthcare decisions for themselves. Unlike a healthcare proxy, a power of attorney gives someone the authority to act as soon as it's fully executed. So once you sign it and it's fully signed by everybody who needs to sign it, and the agent signs it as well, that person has the authority to act on your behalf. So it's very important that you pick someone and give power of attorney to someone that you trust. It's a legal document, it's in writing, there's language that has to be there according to New York State. It needs to be signed in front of witnesses, and it needs to be notarized. So again, does a dementia diagnosis mean that you cannot exercise or fill one of these out? It doesn't. The person who signs it has to be an adult. They have to understand the nature and consequences of the document. So they have to understand the powers that they're giving and who they're giving the power to. You can appoint more than one person to be your agent, or your power of attorney. And so let's say I pick Jack and Jill to have my power of attorney. I can say that they have to act together, which would mean that they have to go to the bank together. They each have to sign every check. Or I can say that they have the authority to act independently. So only one of them is needed to sign a check or make a decision. I can also name one of them to have the power of attorney and name the other one as successor. So that, let's say, Jack, bless you, Jack has power of attorney. And when Jack can no longer act, Jill is the successor, and she then has the power to act. These are no longer effective after you die, and the person is supposed to act in your best interest. If you decide that you don't trust the person anymore and you have the capacity, or you just don't think they're acting in your best interest, you can revoke them. And we definitely recommend that you revoke it in writing and submit the written revocation to your financial institution. Again, these are New York specific documents. You can name someone, though, who is not in New York State. Each state has their own laws. So if you need someone to act for you out of state, you need to consult that state's laws. So there are definitely challenges with these documents. And part of the problem is that with the power of attorney, you don't realize that it's not a complete document until you need it to act on someone else's behalf. It's possible to print these documents and download them from the internet. You don't necessarily need to go to a lawyer, but there are details that need to be taken care of and they need to be signed properly. Sometimes they are not signed, they are incomplete in the way they are filled out, or they're not notarized. And banks or financial institutions won't honor them if they're not appropriately filled out. Also, sometimes people will limit the power that they give the power of the other individual, which means that when that person needs the authority to act and do long-term planning, they don't have all of the power that they need. So it's a good idea to do these early and submit it to your bank or financial institution so that if they have extra forms they need you to fill out, or they don't think that the form is filled out correctly, you can know that before it's actually needed. So the way to avoid these issues is really to fill them out early. So let's say the person no longer has capacity to fill out these documents and you don't have them in place. What do? What you may need to do is go to court and have a guardianship proceeding, which Siobhan's going to talk about.
Like Deborah just mentioned, a guardianship is a court proceeding where you name one or more persons to handle someone's finances and their healthcare needs. So a guardianship is needed when someone is likely to be harmed because they lack the ability to appreciate, to adequately understand that the fact that they can no longer handle their medical decisions or their finances so basically when they can no longer handle these things on their own, and the fact that they can't handle them is going to lead to them suffering harm, and the person doesn't have any advance directive in place to name a substitute to act for them, that's when we need to go to court and file a guardianship. So the advantages of a guardianship is that this is the process that allows a guardian to be appointed to basically safeguard the person's assets and arrange for their mental and physical healthcare needs. But there are quite a number of disadvantages of a guardianship. It's costly, it's time consuming, and it's stressful. It is a court proceeding, so there are a number of documents that need to be prepared to be submitted to the court. There's also a hearing that needs to take place. This is also an ongoing process. So whereas you can sign your advance directives and they're in place for when you need them, or even with the power of attorney, they're in place from day one when they're fully signed and notarized. A guardianship is ongoing. So you go to court, you have someone appointed as a guardian, but the guardian has to report back to the court yearly with regard to the person's finances and their well-being. the court is overseeing all aspects of the person's life because a guardian has now been appointed to take care of all of these things. It's also stressful for the guardian who has to go through these things. And like we heard earlier, sometimes someone with dementia is still at a stage where they understand some things that are going on. It can be embarrassing for them to have to go to court and hear that someone believes that they can't handle things on their own anymore. So the big takeaway from this section is that a guardianship is something that you want to avoid. And you can avoid a guardianship by having a power of attorney, by having a healthcare proxy and a living will in place before something goes wrong. And these are simple documents that can be prepared. Like Deborah mentioned, they do need to be executed properly. But once they're in place, you have the option to revoke them. You can change what you need to be changed. If your wishes change, you can change your living will. If you want to change who your healthcare agent is or your power of attorney, you can do that also. So it's more important to have them in place and change them later if you need to do that than to not have them in place at all. And as we heard from Rachel, dementia is a progressive disease that interferes with people's daily life. So someone may have been able to live independently, but as the dementia progresses, they might not be able to do that anymore. And they may need help with custodial care, which is activities of daily living. So the things that we do daily for ourselves, such as toileting or bathing or grooming, buying groceries, cooking, these are things that someone with dementia will eventually probably lose the ability to do on their own. And because it might not be safe for them to be at home because they can't do all of these things themselves, they might need to change their living environment. They might not be able to live alone anymore. Their caregivers may not be able to take care of them at home anymore. So they may need to go to an assisted living facility or may need to go to a nursing home. And as we also heard, the costs are astronomical. And sometimes people need help to cover all of these costs. So now Deborah will discuss the costs and how some people may be able to pay for them.
So the costs for custodial care can range greatly. However, they all tend to be expensive. So on average, home care that's having aides to your home and other services can be an average of $6,000 to $8,000 per month. Assisted living facilities can charge $10,000 to $12,000 a month or more. And nursing homes on average charge $18,000 to $21,000 a month. Additional costs could be if you need extra aides or even a ventilator, that will be an additional cost. These vary greatly depending on geographic location and the type of facility and the type of care. But what you can see, if nothing else, is that these costs will add up quickly. So the question is, how do you pay for them? If you have a lot of assets saved, maybe you go the route of private pay, the route of private pay, pardon me. So you're just paying from your assets and savings. Maybe you have a long-term care insurance policy that covers some or all of the custodial care that an individual needs. And if you don't have the assets saved and you don't have a long-term care insurance policy that covers the costs, you might need to apply for Medicaid. Shervaun will talk about that.
So Medicaid is a joint federal and state program that provides medical and custodial care for persons over 65, the blind, and the disabled. To qualify for Medicaid, you must medically qualify, and you must also financially qualify, because Medicaid is a means-tested program, which means that they're going to look at your income and asset because they have income and asset limits. But so just to explain, Medicaid is going to look at your income. Income is the money that you receive monthly. Your assets are the property that you have, such as bank accounts or a home. The process can be time consuming. Medicaid wants a great deal of paperwork to make sure you actually qualify. And once you submit the paperwork, it also takes a while to hear back from Medicaid as to their decision. So some misconceptions about Medicaid and your assets. A lot of people think that because you have to have low income and assets, that if you have above the level, that Medicaid is going to take all of your assets, or that you have to get rid of every single dime that you have to qualify. And that is not the case. Another thing that we often hear is that people are worried about losing their home. But a house is not considered an available resource in calculating whether someone is eligible for Medicaid, as long as either the Medicaid applicant, their spouse, or a disabled child resides at the home. And there are also other assets that are exempt, such as an IRA that is in payout status. So when someone has dementia or otherwise needs custodial care, there are two types of Medicaid that are usually applied for. Institutional Medicaid is nursing home Medicaid. That is what it pays for. Community Medicaid is also called home-based Medicaid because it's often used to pay for aides who allow a person to remain at home. But if you or a loved one are in a situation where you think that you may need to apply for Medicaid, we ask you please to consult with an elder law attorney to discuss strategies and discuss your situation, because there may be ways to help you become Medicaid eligible. Don't automatically look at what your income and asset levels are and think that it's automatically a done deal that you can't get Medicaid. There are ways to protect assets. And again, there are some assets that are exempt. So there may be a possibility for obtaining Medicaid. Another thing we would like to urge you is please don't take it upon yourself to start divesting of yourself, of your assets, because that can actually lead to more harm than good. You cannot divest yourself of your assets to become Medicaid eligible. And doing that will actually possibly lead to a period of ineligibility. So now I will give it back to Deborah for the key takeaways.
So just very quickly before I go over the takeaways, I just want to differentiate between Medicaid, which Shervaun just talked about, and Medicare. So Medicare is a federal health insurance program for individuals 65 or older and younger individuals with disabilities. Medicare, which covers doctor's visits and hospital visits and potentially prescription drug costs, does not pay for custodial care. So what are our key takeaways? If you don't remember anything about what we just said, or you only remember some of it, please remember that early planning is important. There are documents that you can put into place to help for early planning, for long-term planning later. If you haven't done early planning, there are solutions available. And as you heard from the Alzheimer's Association, there are resources available to help you. We recommend that you consult an estate planning attorney who understands elder care planning and the issues you might be facing. Thank you very much for coming. I believe we're taking questions now.
Okay.
If you haven't,
we are going to take questions. I'm going to start from the beginning, and anything that we can't cover in this session, we will work to get answered. Is there any hope for a cure for Alzheimer's? Is the first question.
If there was no hope, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing every day. Our mission is a world without Alzheimer's. We do this by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction, and providing quality care for those afflicted. There is more hope now than there's ever been in the history of Alzheimer's disease as we know it. We're kind of on the precipice of a very important era. We like to say we're in the era of treatment. There is so much research being done in different areas. So I spoke about the class of drugs that attacks the beta amyloid. Some people don't think beta amyloid is the reason for Alzheimer's. Others, that is the main hypothesis. The beta amyloid cascade hypothesis says that your brain has all of this plaque, and the plaque kills the neurons. When the neurons die, you have the symptoms that you have. But there are other scientists who think potentially there are other things that are causing Alzheimer's, and the plaque is just there. So my point is that there are other areas of research in a variety of different areas, and it may be that the most effective treatment will be a cocktail, like with HIV, where you take one drug for the beta amyloid, you take another drug for the tau tangles, and then another drug for inflammation. So yes, there's a lot of hope.
Great, thank you for that. Are the newly approved drugs mentioned only for younger, I guess younger people in the early stage diagnosed with Alzheimer's?
So the two drugs, Leqembi and donanemab, they're only approved for people with mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's and people with mild dementia. So what they have to do is they have to do a PET scan or a lumbar puncture. They have to see that you actually have the plaque, because that's what these drugs do. They dissolve the plaque. We're very hopeful, because it used to be the policy of CMS that people only were allotted one PET scan per lifetime. So they've changed that policy, and now people can have more PET scans because they need to see that the medicine is working. And with a drug like the newest drug, donanemab, people actually stopped taking the drug when all the plaque was gone. So that's what it's approved for.
Is the plaque in the brain that was described different from plaque caused by cholesterol and plaque that causes strokes?
Yeah, I believe so. First of all, I'm not a researcher and I'm not a doctor, so take that. The beta amyloid plaque is a particular type of protein. I believe that the plaque in your arteries is a different type, but I could be wrong. But that's my belief.
Are there supports and/or resources available for adults with intellectual disabilities living with dementia? Do you provide training for staff that work with adults with intellectual disabilities that live in a group home setting?
Absolutely. I can't remember the name of the organization, but I was there about a year and a half ago, and they work with people with developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and we did a training for their staff. We don't have trainings geared towards that specific subpopulation, but we absolutely have trainings that would be applicable to everyone, including them.
I'm going to jump down to a legal question and then jump back up. Shervaun said Medicaid does not take an IRA in payout. Does that mean Medicaid does not consider your retirement assets for the asset? Hold on. For the asset and income test. And in the look back period, and is the look back period 5 years for Medicaid?
I'm having audio issues. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, what was the first part of the question again?
The
About
first,
IRA.
yeah, the first part of the question was, Shervaun said Medicaid does not take an IRA in payout. Does that mean Medicaid does not consider your retirement assets for the asset and income test? That was the first part of the question.
So if the IRA is in payout status, then it is an exempt resource that will not be counted when they're counting your assets together. But if there is a required minimum distribution, which there should be if it's in payout status, that is included in your income and calculating your income.
Did everybody hear that? Okay. And is the look back period 5 years for Medicaid?
Very good question. The look back period for institutional or nursing home Medicaid is 5 years. The community Medicaid is a very complicated issue right now, because technically in 2020, the law was changed where there will be a 30-month look back, a 2.5-year look back that has not been implemented yet. So as of right now, there is no look back for community Medicaid.
What's the best current medicine that slows down Lewy body dementia?
So unfortunately, the great breakthroughs have been with this new class, these monoclonal antibodies that dissolve the beta amyloid plaque. So that's been a huge breakthrough, but that's just for people with Alzheimer's. With people with Lewy body dementia, we don't have a comparable breakthrough. The gold standard are those drugs that I mentioned, the acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, Aricept, Exelon, those drugs.
So a question, you mentioned the importance of exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle. Can you expand on lifestyle?
Absolutely. Rachele could probably do a better job than me, but
I'm
know,
happy to take it,
okay,
David.
please take it.
In the program that we offer, Healthy Living, as I said, it's my favorite program. So things like sleep, the importance of sleep is just, I can't tell you how important it is to get at least 6 hours, but preferably 7 to 8 hours of sleep, because it allows the brain to really get rid of the toxins and process everything that needs to be processed to prevent the buildup of plaques and amyloids and other things. So sleep is a key one that I think we can all work on. Smoking is bad in many, many ways. And that's something that, even if you're not the one smoking, if you're exposed to people that are smoking, that's a key thing that needs to be addressed. Diet and exercise, yes, these are really, it's not rocket science. We know what a good diet looks like. We know lots of fruits and vegetables. And then exercising, any kind of movement helps. Every time the heart beats, the brain gets 20% of that blood flow. So getting the heart moving is so important. And things like mental health, cognitive engagement, keeping your brain, learning new things, stretching your brain, learning something that you never thought you could do. New languages, a cooking class, building a table, all of those kinds of things will help get your brain more engaged and keep those brain cells growing. And then social engagement, I think, is a key part of lifestyle changes. It's been proven that people that are engaged and part of communities, things like volunteering, all of those things are helpful in keeping your brain healthy.
Thank you. I'm going to jump back down to a legal question and then up to another question. How can it be decided that a person is at the point where she can't make informed decisions about their welfare?
I'm gonna try this again. Can anybody hear me? Okay. The determination is actually made by a medical doctor. And depending on where the person is, if they're in say a mental institution, there's certain details in the statute that say that 2 doctors have to make the determination, especially when it comes to end of life decisions. But to see if someone still has capacity is a doctor's decision.
Another question, which is, I believe, the last question. We all live in an environment that is highly polluted. We all have toxins, heavy metals, plastics, PFA chemicals in our bodies. I did not hear any speaker address functional medicine approaches to curing Alzheimer's by getting rid of these toxins. What can you say about this and the work of Dr. Dale Bredesen and Dr. Mary K. Ross and Apollos Healthcare?
So that's a great question. And I think that I'll start just by saying that we just had our AAIC, so the Alzheimer's International Conference in Philadelphia. And in fact, they came out saying that forest fire, the smoke, absolutely increases chances of Alzheimer's and dementia. So when we talk about functional medicine, we're really talking about getting to the root causes of what brings about these cognitive changes. And with Dr. Bredesen, I always mess up his name, but We do not recommend his protocol. We believe that the large-scale randomized clinical trials are the gold standard, and he has not, to the best of my knowledge, used those kind of trials, smaller trials. So we don't recommend him or his work, although we have in the past, I think in 2006 and 2013, paid for 2 of his research trials, not related to lifestyle, related to other things. But at this point, we just don't see the evidence to support his conclusions or his program. So we don't promote that. But we are very excited because, and this kind of piggybacks on what Rachel said, that the Lancet Commission came out a couple of years ago and they said, and this is really an empowering statistic and maybe a great place to bring this to an end, is that 40% of Alzheimer's and dementia can be either delayed or prevented through modifiable risk factors. So that is incredible. So we are doing something called the Pointer Study. And this summer, we're going to get the results, and it's all about modifiable risk factors. So controlling your blood pressure, controlling diabetes, eating well, staying in school, maintaining healthy weight, exercising, not smoking. This study will kind of inform us as to exactly how much can these changes impact our continued cognitive health. So we're very excited to get those results. Yes.
Well, I see, Richard, you have your hand up raised. Do you have a
Yes,
question?
I'd like, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to ask David a follow-up question. One of the things that Dr. Bredesen addresses is he says, okay, we're just going to test your body. We're going to find out if you have any mold, if you have any infections, if you have any mercury. So that's without getting into his treatment protocol. He at least seems to investigate the underlying causes that patients might be subjected to. I don't understand how the Alzheimer's Association can object to gaining more information from patients that are exhibiting cognitive decline.
So I'm gonna jump in here unless David wants to answer. I think this is probably a dialogue that maybe can be had offline.
Feel free to shoot me an email. We could discuss it.
Okay, can I have your email address?
Sure, I put it in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. So if there are not any further questions, I want to once again, this is has been a great conversation. This is the 4th nonprofit assets that we've done this year, or 5th, I forget, and they've all been really incredibly important to the community at large, the business sector, the nonprofit sector, government sector. We've partnered with businesses, we've partnered with government on mental health, LGBTQ and pronouns, other resources for the community, twice so far again, with Cuddy Feder and our government partners on domestic violence, now on Alzheimer's. These recordings are on our website, and really, really grateful to the nonprofit sector for your expertise and for fortifying our community and our partners. Again, to Cuddy Feder, we really appreciate your support for these last 2. It's been so great working with you. We look forward to working with you on delivering more of these next year as well. But this is the last for 2024, and we hope to see you all at our end of year celebration of the nonprofit sector. Keep Westchester thriving. Please go onto our website and find out more. And thank you all so much. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Is this going to be, the recording going to be on the NPW or the Alzheimer's Association website?
It's going to be on our website in our resources section, where we have other really cool resources too. But yeah, a lot of. Thank you so much to our presenters as well. You guys were great, really great.